In the early morning hours over the deserts of northern Iraq, silence was shattered by the roar of jet engines. From the darkness, precision-guided bombs streaked down toward their targets, black shapes in the sand that only days earlier had been columns of ISIS fighters advancing toward the city of Erbil. The explosions were more than just the beginning of another airstrike. They marked the start of a new chapter in modern warfare. It was August 8, 2014, and what began that day would evolve into one of the most complex international military operations of the 21st century. Operation Inherent Resolve, the coalition campaign to destroy the so-called Islamic State. This wasn't just another war in the Middle East. It was a conflict that combined intelligence networks, drone surveillance, special operations, and regional alliances across dozens of nations, all united by a single, grim mission to end one of the most violent extremist movements the modern world had ever seen. To understand Operation Inherent Resolve, we have to go back a few years to the aftermath of the Iraq War. When U.S. troops withdrew from Iraq in 2011, the country was fractured, politically, militarily, and socially. Sectarian tensions between Sunni and Shia communities were rising, and the remnants of al-Qaeda in Iraq were waiting patiently for their chance to return. That chance came in the chaos of the Syrian civil war. By 2013, amid the ruins of Aleppo and Raqqa, a new extremist group emerged, more organized, more brutal and far better funded than its predecessors. They called themselves the Islamic State of Iraq and al-Sham, or ISIS. Their vision wasn't limited to a few towns. They wanted a caliphate, a self-declared Islamic empire stretching across borders. Within months, ISIS militants swept across western Iraq, capturing Fallujah, Tikrit, and then in June 2014, the unthinkable, Mosul, Iraq's second-largest city. The Iraqi army collapsed in days. Entire divisions dropped their weapons and fled. ISIS looted banks, seized American-made weapons, and declared the birth of their caliphate from Mosul's Great Mosque. It was a stunning and terrifying moment, and it demanded a global response. President Barack Obama had promised to end America's forever wars, but the situation unfolding in Iraq and Syria left no room for inaction. Tens of thousands of Yazidis were trapped on Mount Sinjar, surrounded by ISIS fighters. The city of Erbil, where U.S. personnel were stationed, was under threat. In early August 2014, the United States began limited airstrikes to stop ISIS advances. But within weeks it became clear that a larger, more coordinated campaign would be needed. On October 15, 2014, the Pentagon formally named the mission Operation Inherent Resolve. The goal was simple on paper: defeat ISIS. But in practice, it would take a coalition of more than 80 nations, a delicate balance of regional politics, and years of relentless coordination between military and intelligence agencies. The coalition was unlike anything seen since the Gulf War. The United States provided the backbone, with its air power, intelligence, and special forces, but other nations soon joined. The United Kingdom, France, Canada, Australia, and several Arab states began conducting airstrikes. Germany provided training and logistics. Jordan and the UAE launched sorties against ISIS targets in Syria. But perhaps the most crucial contributions came from local partners on the ground, the Iraqi security forces, the Kurdish Peshmerga, and later, the Syrian Democratic Forces, or SDF. Together, they would form the human front line of Operation Inherent Resolve. Behind them, a complex web of intelligence assets tracked ISIS movements, monitored encrypted communications, and coordinated strikes with precision. Satellites, drones, and reconnaissance aircraft worked around the clock, creating what one Pentagon analyst described as a 24-hour digital battlefield. In late 2014, the world's attention shifted to the small Syrian town of Kobani, near the Turkish border. ISIS fighters, armed with tanks and heavy weapons captured from Mosul, laid siege to the Kurdish defenders inside the city. For weeks, the world watched as airstrikes pounded ISIS positions, while Kurdish fighters, outnumbered and outgunned, held their ground street by street. It became a symbol of resistance. With the help of hundreds of coalition airstrikes, Kobani was finally liberated in January 2015. It was the first major defeat for ISIS, and it proved that, with the right coordination, the coalition could stop and even reverse their advance. But Kobani was only the beginning. Across Iraq and Syria, ISIS controlled a territory roughly the size of the United Kingdom. Dismantling it would take years of brutal urban warfare. Operation Inherent Resolve was as much an intelligence war as it was a kinetic one. Every bomb dropped required confirmation, often multiple times, to minimize civilian casualties and verify targets. Teams from the CIA, NSA, and partner agencies built a vast database of ISIS leadership structures. Drones monitored convoys and gatherings. Cyber units worked to disrupt ISIS propaganda and online recruitment efforts. The coalition wasn't just fighting a military enemy, it was also fighting a digital one, a network that spread its ideology across social media and encrypted channels. Intelligence led to success in the shadows. High-value targets were eliminated through drone strikes and special operations raids. One by one, ISIS's commanders were hunted down, often replaced, but never as effectively. The pressure was constant, and over time it began to show. By 2016, ISIS's so-called caliphate was shrinking, but its heart, the city of Mosul, remained heavily fortified. Retaking it would be the largest urban battle in Iraq since the 2003 invasion. The assault began in October 2016. Iraqi forces, supported by Kurdish units and US-led coalition advisors, advanced from multiple directions. Over 9 grueling months, they fought through booby-trapped streets, suicide car bombs, and sniper fire. Every neighborhood was a maze of tunnels and ambushes. Civilians were caught in the crossfire. ISIS used them as human shields, making each step forward a moral and tactical challenge. Precision airstrikes supported the advance, but the cost was high. By July 2017, the black flag over Mosul's Great Mosque was torn down, symbolically ending the caliphate's claim to territory in Iraq. But victory in Mosul came at a staggering price. Tens of thousands of lives lost and a city left in ruins. Meanwhile, across the border, attention turned to Raqqa, the de facto capital of ISIS's Syrian stronghold. The US-backed Syrian Democratic Forces, a coalition of Kurdish and Arab fighters, launched their offensive in June 2017. The battle mirrored Mosul in its intensity. Coalition airpower pounded ISIS positions day and night, while ground troops moved methodically through the city. Street by street, ISIS was driven out. In October 2017, Raqqa fell. The caliphate's capital was gone. But even as the black flags came down, the threat remained. Thousands of ISIS fighters melted into the desert or blended with civilians, waiting for the chance to resurface. Operation Inherent Resolve shifted from open warfare to counterinsurgency, hunting remnants, dismantling sleeper cells and preventing the group's return. In early 2019, the coalition closed in on the last ISIS stronghold, the town of Baghuz, near the Euphrates River. What remained of the caliphate was trapped. Thousands of fighters, their families and civilians, surrounded on all sides. After weeks of bombardment and negotiations, the final ISIS enclave collapsed in March 2019. Images of dust-covered women and children fleeing the smoldering ruins of Baghuz marked the symbolic end of ISIS's territorial rule. President Donald Trump declared the Islamic State defeated. Yet, military leaders cautioned this was not the end of the war. ISIS had lost its territory, but not its ideology. Even after 2019, Operation Inherent Resolve continued. Special forces from the US, the UK, and other coalition members remained in the region, conducting raids against ISIS leaders who had gone underground. In 2022, US Special Operations Forces carried out a daring nighttime raid in northwestern Syria, killing ISIS leader Abu Ibrahim al-Hashimi al-Qurashi. It echoed earlier missions, as precise, secretive, and lightning-fast. These operations weren't about reclaiming land anymore. They were about preventing resurgence, keeping ISIS from reorganizing into a global terror network. By this time, coalition forces had trained hundreds of thousands of local troops, enabling Iraq and Syria's regional forces to handle most ground operations. The war had shifted from direct combat to long-term stabilization and counter-terrorism. The military campaign may have succeeded in destroying ISIS's territorial control, but the human cost was staggering. Cities like Mosul and Raqqa were left in ruins. Millions were displaced. Entire communities were scarred by years of war. humanitarian organizations faced the monumental task of rebuilding infrastructure and providing aid to survivors. The ideological wounds, the resentment, fear, and mistrust would take even longer to heal. Even as coalition troops scaled back operations, the threat persisted in the shadows. Small cells continued to carry out bombings and assassinations in remote areas. The war on terror had not ended. It had simply changed form. Operation Inherent Resolve demonstrated how modern warfare had evolved, a blend of drones, data, and diplomacy. It showed the power of coalition unity, but also the limits of air power in solving complex political crises. For many, it was a reminder that defeating an idea requires more than defeating an army. The coalition could destroy the caliphate's territory, but not the ideology that fueled it. The real victory lay in preventing that ideology from taking root again, in rebuilding societies, strengthening governance, and addressing the grievances that allowed groups like ISIS to rise in the first place. Today, Operation Inherent Resolve continues in a quieter form, advising, assisting, and maintaining a presence to ensure ISIS never again rises from the ashes. As the world's attention shifted to new crises and new conflicts, Operation Inherent Resolve faded from the headlines. Yet in the deserts of Iraq and the valleys of Syria, coalition drones still patrol the skies, intelligence officers still monitor encrypted channels, and special operations teams still prepare for missions that most of the world will never hear about. This is the quiet phase of the war, the shadow war. It's fought not for glory or headlines, but to preserve a fragile peace bought at an enormous cost. Operation Inherent Resolve may not have the cinematic drama of past wars, but its story is one of cooperation, endurance, and vigilance in an age where enemies don't always wear uniforms and battlefields aren't always marked on maps. The campaign continues, not as a single operation, but as a lesson in modern warfare, that victory in the 21st century isn't just about firepower, but about persistence, partnership, and the resolve to prevent history from repeating itself.